Welcome to AWAI's Great Books Club with your host, Marcella Allison.
Welcome, everyone, to AWAI's Great Books Club for September. This month we are doing The War of Art, not The Art of War, very tricky, but The War of Art by Steven Pressfiel. This is one of my very favorite books, so I'm just thrilled that we're doing that this month. And I have as my special guest Nick Usborne, and I have asked Nick to join me because he is the least woo-woo guy I know. And so Nick and I are going to have the great woo-woo debate as we talk about the war of art, the reasons for resistance, which somehow, by some miracle, Nick, you have never suffered from, or maybe not to the degree that I and some of my cohorts have suffered through. And then we're going to talk about how to address resistance. And then at the end, we're going to have some real fun with some of the more woo-woo aspects, as I like to call it, of this book and how I use those on a regular basis to get to my desk and get the work done. So without further ado, let me introduce my special guest, Nick Usborne. Nick, am I saying your name right? Because I'd really rather not butcher it for the whole phone call.
Yeah, no, that's good. People often get it right.
Many of you, of course, have heard Nick speak at boot camp, and you're coming this year, right?
I'll be there.
Absolutely. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I really wanted Nick on this call, because if you've heard him talk at boot camp, you know that he's very practical. He gives a lot of down-to-earth advice, really clear next steps that can take you from where you are to where you want to be, and I thought this would be a perfect companion for this book. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there, and I hope the folks on the call will be joining us there, and we could maybe meet up in the bar for a drink or two and continue our debate on both sides.
Yeah, we can have the book club bar event.
The book club bar event. I love it. Okay, for some reason, there we go. So this book is by Steven Pressfiel, and he shares in this book really his struggles to become a paid working writer, and he is very upfront about all the detours he took on his way, which I'm sure many of our listeners can identify with. And he says, you know, in fact, it took him 17 years to get his first paycheck as a writer. Now, I think it took me less than that, and I'm thinking most of our listeners, with the help of AWAI, are going to get there a whole lot faster than 17 years. And it's unfortunate that Nick did not, or that Steven did not have the benefit of our great team here behind him. I have seen his movie that he wrote the script for, The Legend of Bagger Vance, which is wonderful, and that was one of his first breakthroughs. What we're here to talk about today is really his philosophy and how he himself in his own life breaks through resistance. And so I love this quote. He says, "My writing philosophy is a kind of warrior code, internal rather than external, in which the enemy is identified as those forms of self-sabotage that I call resistance with a capital R. The technique for combating these foes can be described as turning pro." And that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. And when he turned pro, he just lit out like, you know, a bat on fire. In fact, his novels, I don't know if you know this, Nick, his novels are considered so accurate in their description of ancient Greece that they're the only fiction that's ever been required reading at Oxford.
Yeah, I've read them. They're very good.
Yeah, I have too. Have you read his newest one, the one about the war in, I haven't read that one yet, the one that just came out.
No, the one I read was, I've read a couple. The one that comes to mind is the one about Alexander the Great.
Yes. He's just fantastic in making these military campaigns come alive. And the one thing I will say for our members and for anyone listening is, if you don't subscribe to his blog, he has a great blog about writing and resistance called Writing Wednesdays, and it kind of continues sort of daily or rather weekly ruminations where the War of Art left off. And so if anybody wants to subscribe to that, I highly recommend it. Okay, sorry guys, I'm being spastic here with my little laptop. Doesn't want to move forward. There we go. Well, for some reason, it doesn't want to stay in the title. Okay. So he says, I wrote in The War of Art that I could divide my life neatly into two parts, before turning pro and after. After is better. And our goal on this call today is to have everybody turn pro by the end of the call. I think we can pull it off, Nick. What do you think? Even cold medicine and all. I think we can do this. Come on.
Okay.
Throw caution to the wind, Nick. I loved this quote. This is why.
We can give them the tools. We can't make them use them.
Well, we could hold a gun to their head. No, that wouldn't be good. We're going to give them the tools, and we're going to strongly encourage them to use them, and here's why. I mean, I love this quote from Alan Stacy, one of our book club members. He left this on our Facebook page, which allows me to do a shameless plug. Folks, I really need you to leave comments and questions on the Facebook page because that allows me to engage with the book in the way that is most helpful to you all. And I'm really going to push you guys to do this for our live book club call that we have coming up in October with the fabulous Richard Armstrong talking about scientific advertising and my life in advertising. So get reading that book, start leaving me your questions. So I love Alan Stacy left this on the Facebook page, and he says, Pressfiel masterfully explores, exposes, and extrapolates my biggest roadblock, resistance. With boot camp, spec assignments, and other copy challenges looming, the timing of this couldn't be better. And I agree. If ever there was a time when you needed to make the decision to turn pro and to commit to it, right before boot camp is perfect, don't you think? All right. So, are you ready for our great woo-woo debate, Nick?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Bring it on.
Must be like a bug.
So, I think I heard that. So, I think the first question that we want to talk about is, does writer's block or resistance really exist? And so, Nick, I guess my first question for you is, have you experienced resistance, and what does that feel like for you? And I know when we talked briefly on the phone, you said to me that there were two reasons only why you experienced resistance.
Right.
You said, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I don't even know what writer's block is, to be honest.
Oh, I'm feeling evil towards you.
Excuse me. I would make the point that I think if I were a novelist or a full-time poet or a painter or a musician, it might be a little different for me. But what I've always seen commercial writing and copywriting as, I always see it more as a craft. Certainly it has elements of art in it. Excuse me. So I don't really have writer's block. I never kind of look at a blank page and my mind kind of goes weird, nothing happens. I can always get something down. It may not always be the best, but I get something down. As for resistance, when we were talking, I think there are a couple of reasons why I feel resistance when I'm working on a job. And I think the first cause is when I don't really want to do the job.
Right.
I'm thinking particularly of one job where I said yes because the money was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rest of us, I had bills to pay, so I said yes.
Don't we all?
And I knew it wasn't really up my street, and I knew I wasn't that comfortable with the company and the guy I was dealing with. But I said yes, and the trouble is, and I sat down to write, and I felt this massive resistance because there was, part of me that just didn't want to do it.
Right.
In the end, very unprofessional of me, I actually rang you up and said, look, I can't do this. I'd taken 50% of the fee, and I had to send it back. So that's one reason why I feel resistance. So it's not really a woo-woo thing. It's just an error on my part.
Right.
The other one is where somehow I've allowed myself to be out-negotiated, and I'm not being paid what I think I'm worth.
Which happens to all of us. This is true.
And the trouble is that just pisses me off from start to finish. And it does impact my ability to get the work done. Now, I hope I'm not some kind of prima donna, but there is certainly for me, and I've heard other people talk about this, there's certainly resistance comes up when you feel you're being taken advantage of, or somehow you've been tricked, or even if it's entirely your fault and you said yes to a price that you shouldn't have said yes to. So those are really the only two reasons that I feel resistance when working. Now, it doesn't mean to say that when I work that it always comes easy. It doesn't mean to say I don't have good days and bad days. But I think in terms of like sensing an internal resistance, something pushing me back.
Well, you said something really interesting at the beginning that I just want to go back to real quick, which is you said, I think if I was and then you said, poet or novelist, this might be more real for me. And Lois, my writing partner, and I were talking about this the other day. And we both, me far more than her, but we both experienced resistance. And both of us actually started out writing as creative writers. And I wonder sometimes if, I think of myself as a writer, that writing is what I do, and I often put my identity into being a writer. And one thing he brings up in this book that I think is interesting is he says, look, the professional knows that the writing is not them. The writing is just the product. It's outside of them. And I think sometimes because I started out in this creative path, I identify myself as writer, just like someone would say painter or musician. And so when you said that, I thought, here's part of the secret is think of yourself more as a craftsman. And I think that's one little gem that came up. Oh, heck, this is just, sorry, I am just not.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I often use my older brother as an example. He's a cabinet maker.
Mm-hmm.
He does kind of high-end kitchens and wine cellars and fancy stuff like that for rich people. And basically, he may be given a detailed plan, or he may be just showed the room and given a general description. He has to do the plan, and then he buys up all the wood and he puts it together and he gets the job done. Now, when I say he's a craftsman, I'm not just saying he's like some guy who slaps paint on a wall. I mean,
right.
There's a lot of art in that. He's very, very talented with wood. But he's provided the brief and the materials, or rather, he knows what materials he has to get. It's a little bit the same with us. We're told what the job is. We're told what the desired outcome is. We're given a briefing. We're given information. So it's not like we are a poet where you have to wait, in a sense, somehow for inspiration to hit. We're actually given a package. Like, here's the job. Here's what we want you to do. Here are the materials available. Here's the information you're going to need. So yeah, I think I've always seen myself. I identify myself as well as a writer. If someone asks me, hey, what do you do? I say I'm a writer. That's what I do, in various forms. But yes, that's what I am. I'm a writer. But yes, I see myself more as a craftsperson than an artiste, as it were, or a wholly creative artist. So, yeah, I think that helps me a lot in terms of all of this resistance and writer's block and stuff like that.
And that's exactly what's going to come up in Turning Pro. When we talk about what do you have to do, step one is you have to, that's exactly the mentality you have to take.
Right.
And I want, before we move to the very elegant solutions that he offers to the forms of resistance, I want to just focus on a few of the forms of resistance. I want to go through quickly the ones that he brings up, and then I ask folks to share with us on the web page some of the things that they have experienced as resistance. And I think then, Nick, as we turn to Turning Pro, I want to look at each one of those individually and do just what we just did in terms of, okay, problem, you're over-identifying, myself as the sort of tortured artiste. Think of yourself as a craftsman. You're just going to sit down and do this. As the queen of procrastination, which I freely admit, and something I've spent lots of time struggling with and trying to understand the underlying psychology of, I have to say I absolutely love this quote from the foreword by Robert McKee, who's the person who wrote Story, which is something we're going to read in one of the upcoming book clubs. Don't ask me what I haven't figured out.
Excellent book.
It is fantastic. So I love it. I love this quote from him. He says, Steven Pressfiel wrote The War of Art for me. He undoubtedly wrote it for you, too, but I know he did it expressly for me because I hold Olympic records for procrastination. I can procrastinate thinking about my procrastination. I can procrastinate dealing with my problem of procrastinating thinking about my procrastination problem. And I think this is, you know, when we talk about resistance, I think for many of us, this is the most common manifestation, as he says. And I love where he says it's very pernicious, right? Because you're not saying, I'll never do it. You're just doing the Scarlett O'Hara thing, right? Oh, think about that tomorrow. And so pretty soon tomorrow becomes 3 weeks from now, and then the deadline's here, and we haven't done anything. And then we go into full-blown panic. And I think for me, when I get down to what goes on with my procrastination, I think part of it is that over-identifying that we talked about, right? Like the work is me. What if I do the work and it fails? Then I'll be a failure, or I won't be good enough. You know, that idea, that fear of actually having to put the work out there. And what I love, go ahead.
Can I jump in with something?
Yes, absolutely.
That fear of failure and stuff. I mean,
scares the crap out of me.
I mean, just get over it, because in our business, in the copywriting business, most of the time we fail.
Oh, I hate it.
Have you ever met like last week you were off with all these fancy pants direct response copywriting
gallivanting around.
I mean, do you honestly think that everything they do is a winner?
Of course not.
No, probably like 7 out of 10 of what they do is not some heroic beating of control. It's not something to write out. It's not something they talk about on the stage. Most of the time, we do good, workmanlike work, but it's not remarkable. It doesn't win. It doesn't beat what people had before. So don't set yourself up and thinking, oh, my goodness, if I fail, I'm a failure, because you'll fail most of the time. I mean, I do. But I don't put the failure stuff on my website. I don't talk about them when I'm standing on the stage. I just talk about the 4,000% increase I achieved, and everyone says, oh, my goodness, you must be extraordinary. But I'm not. I'm like anyone else, like 7, 8 out of 10, I bomb. 7 or 8 out of, I mean, it's normal. So get over that part.
You know who I used to say to people, the only other folks I know who are as publicly measured, because I think that's it for me, right? Like if I fail privately at home and nobody knows, it's not a big deal. But like in this business, when I fail, my client knows, everyone on the team on the project with me knows, the guy who beat me, if it was a head-to-head thing, he knows, right? Like they're so. And I used to think the only other industry I can think of where your daily job is like so publicly measured is like stock traders, right? Because like their track records are, you know what I mean?
Even more so is sports.
Oh.
Where they're on live TV and they're either getting it right or they're messing up. And it's like there's a well-known saying somewhere with baseball. The best batter in the world playing baseball misses more than they hit.
Right.
Hey, they're not going to cry like a bunch of babies and refuse to go out on the field just because they might miss, because they know they miss the ball most of the time.
I'm calling you the next time I procrastinate because your tough love is great.
Well,
get over it.
It takes the pressure off when you understand that, in a lot of professions that, hey, and even sometimes, like you went head-to-head with that other guy, and the other guy won, all right? Do you think that's because he's better than you, or do you think perhaps it's because he was lucky? He was lucky that he kind of hit the right message at the right time because something was on the news the day before his letter went out. Sometimes the other writer genuinely is better. A lot of the time, it's just a lucky break. Sometimes when you do really well, it's a lucky break.
I love when you said that because, this seamlessly transitions into our the next slide, which is resistance and self-worth. And, of course, the difference between an amateur and a pro is an amateur lets that negative opinion, you know, take him down. He gives, I mean, I love how he says it, that you cede over, you give over control of your self-worth to this person who is criticizing you, or just to the marketplace. As you say, who knows, right? Hurricane Katrina hits, all your direct mail pieces end up in a warehouse someplace and never get delivered, you know?
Right.
And I think I do that too much. Like, I identify my self-worth with whether the package succeeds or not, and I forget all that part about, you know, that I'm only going to win really 1 or 2 times out of 10, you know, depending on.
And that's all you need to do to be an A-level copywriter. Is because, like I say, you don't talk about the 8, you just talk about the 2.
And I think sometimes when people come to boot camp, they get overwhelmed by that because they hear you and I and other people. And, of course, we don't talk about our failures. And they think that perhaps, you know, we walk on water and everything we do turns out of control, and it's simply not true.
Right. Well, maybe we should do a presentation on my 50 biggest failures.
You know, I would love it, because I will tell you straight up, the one presentation I have remembered of yours forever, all these years, that I tell over and over to myself and to others, is that presentation where you talked about losing the bid because you underestimated your own value, and you were so, like, open. You shared a failure. You shared what you learned from it. And you've shared gazillions of successes with me over the years, and I have to say that one triumph over failure is the message that, like, has stayed with me, because it's true, when we share those lessons, that's what sticks with us. So I'm going to challenge you. We're going to go into some comments from members, and let's just kick back and forth, and if there's a place to talk about a little bit of our failures and how we've overcome them, this might help. And I think especially with your yeoman work, we'll call it your truck driver mentality, because I love when you said that on the phone, that you think of yourself as a truck driver, you know, just get behind the wheel and do it. So here's one about procrastination that I would love to get your take on. This is from Rick Hartman. I challenged people to put their biggest resistance obstacles on the webpage. So he says, oh my God, life is one giant ball of procrastination. My problem is swallowing the frog. Once I can get myself started on the task, it gets a lot easier. However, starting can sometimes take hours while I waste time doing irrelevant tasks that do nothing to get me to my goals. I haven't started the book yet. I loved that part, but I'm looking forward to it. So what are your tips for just getting started?
Well, it's really like it's that mindset, how you view yourself. I mean, my brother, the cabinet maker, you know, he doesn't walk into his workshop at 8:30 in the morning and then rub the Buddha's tummy and say, "Oh, I hope you me today."
Hey, now.
He just sits down. You know, he just looks at his plan and he gets to work. And you know, I think probably, you know, I'm talking like this, but I have an advantage, because my first job as a copywriter was as an employee in an advertising agency. How I got the job, I have no idea. I kind of stumbled into it. I had no qualifications whatsoever. But as soon as I sat down in the creative department, I realized that this was what I was meant to be doing. And so I didn't get, you know, when you talk about all this procrastination and writer's block and views and all that nonsense, that was never part of my life. You know, I was an employee. I sat down.
You'd have been fired.
Yeah, we received the brief. We did the work. I couldn't sit there and say, "I'm sorry, dude, I'm waiting for the muse."
He'd say, "You're also going to be waiting for your paycheck for a long time."
Sit down, and again, it's not like it's always easy. It's not like every project is easy to get done, or that I work at the same pace. Sometimes I struggle. Sometimes it comes easy. Sometimes I feel good in the morning when I sit down. Sometimes I feel bad when I sit down. But I still do the work, with the possible exception of today when I fell into bed this morning and couldn't get up. But generally,
I think for me, sometimes
I think it's a mindset thing. Is if you just view it as, this is what I do. This is my job. I mean, how many jobs can you
and
have?
pretend that boss is walking around whether he is or not. I love when he talks about how setting up his corporation makes him say to himself, well, it's not me, the writer, it's me, Steven Pressfiel, who works for Steven Pressfiel Incorporated. So, you know, my company's Copy Harvest. I think it helps me to say I'm an employee of Copy Harvest. I owe Copy Harvest 8 hours of labor at my desk each day, or you know what I mean?
A thing that I've mentioned in a lot of the talks I've given and I've written about it is the difference between your personal persona and your professional persona.
Exactly.
If you get up in the morning, have your breakfast, you're wearing your track pants, you look like hell, and you sit down at your desk, you're still wearing your personal persona, and you've got all this kind of woo-woo nonsense wrapped around your neck, and it slows you down. If you deliberately make a change, like hey, I was doing some coaching work with a client, and she was having this kind of problem, and I said, look, tomorrow, why don't you get dressed as if you were going to an office? Put on your office clothes. And she didn't. And it was, in fact, she had to ring up and negotiate a deal with the client. And she did exactly that. And she said it made a huge difference. Very
I love it. I knew a trader who used to put on his he would put on his most expensive Brooks Brothers suit, nice tie, good shoe. Like when he wanted to focus, when he felt like he was losing attention, he dressed to the nines when he came to work. I think that's a perfect idea. Dress like you're going to the office.
Yeah, it reminds you that you're at work and you're not at home.
I love that.
And that's a struggle, because most of us as freelancers work from home, and we fail to make that transition in the morning from our personal self to our professional self. So
I want to get through a couple others here. I think that's a fantastic tip for that one. So now let's keep brainstorming because I'm loving this. We're actually sort of mixing the turning pro with the struggles, which is beautiful. It's exactly what I wanted to do today is really look at these. So this is from Jen Adams, and she says, I can always tell if I'm not really into a project by how much time I spend planning to start it. Sometimes even do the whole thing in my head, but a team of wild horses can't make me put hands to the keyboard. On the other hand, when I love a project, I dive right in. And that goes right back to what you said, which is you noticed you experienced resistance when you took it on because you needed the money, but it wasn't really something you had to do. And in that case, you just called up and said, look, this is not a fit. I can't do that. Has there ever been a time when you just sort of, slogged your way through it, pulled on the boots, put the bit in your mouth and went through? And any tips there when you're just in that situation, you don't love it, you do need the money, it's something you need to do. Often we fall in this early on in our career.
But I mean, that's what Pressfiel's talking about when he says being a pro. Not every job is a delight. Not every job.
This is so true.
Not every job's a perfect match. Some clients are just a pain in the butt. The people we work with, sometimes they're fantastic.
Right.
My best clients have taught me a huge amount because they know this business as well as I do or better than I do, and I can just learn. Other clients are idiots, and it can really make it hard to do the job, and they come back with stupid suggestions which are wrong, and you just grit your teeth and work through it. Hey, it's the same, if you're a bartender, some people coming to the bar are really nice, some of them are idiots, but it's your job.
Right. And no job has 100% of the things that you love about it. I mean, every job has the sort of like crappy things you have to do each day.
Right.
There's just no way around it. And I do love, for me, getting past that planning stage to actually starting it. Sometimes it's as simple as a little trick, and I know people have written about this before, by just creating the file and labeling the file, or printing out all the documents. And I love 3-ring binders. I don't know what it is. I just love them. So I will punch holes in everything, and I'll divide it, and I'll put it in the binder. At least I'm moving, you know what I mean? At least, and sometimes just once I've done that, something I'm reading as I'm putting it in the binder will spark an idea. You know what I mean? I'll hook myself unintentionally. Into beginning.
I'll tell you what I do about this resistance to starting. Is that, and this isn't really resistance. It's often when I find it hard, when I'm finding it hard to find the best approach. Is that I do, I come back to this same thing. I'm paid to write, so I write, and I'll write the first page. It doesn't matter whether it's an email or a web page or a sales page, whatever it is. I just write the first page or half page or whatever. I write in the headline. I know when I'm writing it, it's not the headline I'm going to end up with. And I know the first paragraph isn't the first paragraph I'm going to end up with, but I'm a writer, so I just start writing. Then what I do, if Very often when I write it, my interior critic will say, oh my goodness, that first paragraph really sucks. You should be using the second paragraph as your first paragraph. And now I'm on my way. I'm engaged with it.
Right.
I'm recognizing what's good and bad. Other times I'll do, most afternoons if I'm not feeling sick, I finish at 4:30 and I get on my bike and I go cycling for an hour.
Clear your head.
Yeah, but sometimes what I do is before that is I will write that half page. If I know that something's not coming easy to me, it's not this kind of woo-woo resistance thing. It's just that it's not coming easy. It's a tough stuff. So I'll write that first page, then I'll go cycling. I don't deliberately think about it, but very often then when I come back and look at the page, it's obvious to me what I should do next or what I should change.
Just step away from it for those few minutes. But once you've got the crappy first draft down, it allows you entrance to see where the next one should be.
Whatever I'm writing, the first headline I put down is never, ever the final headline.
Which is interesting because our next person says his biggest problem is perfectionism. Get it right the first time, every time. And that kills creativity because then you're never going to get that first line on the paper because it almost never comes out perfect the first time. It just doesn't.
It never is, and it never will be.
No, I don't think so either. So let's.
But I think that goes back to something you said. Is it fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough?
Oh God, always.
The client will look at it and they'll be disappointed in you, and they'll think, "Oh my goodness, this person came so highly recommended." And
that's it exactly.
Yeah. But then you use my second trick, which is always to find. When that happens, what you do is you think, "Oh well, the client's wrong and I'm right."
I love that you do that. Like, that takes such chutzpah, and that's so the difference between me and I'm like, oh, I must have done something wrong. This is terrible. And you're like, no, the guy's an idiot. Clearly, he didn't know what he was doing. I love that.
Okay, so that's how I protect my ego.
But it's important that you protect your ego when you're in a business where you're going to be failing 8 out of 10 times. You have to hold yourself up too, because you're the first line of defense, right? You're the one who has to keep your ego strong so that you can get back to the desk every day. Otherwise, we just crawl under our desk with a bottle of bourbon and give up.
I know. And hey, I joke about it, but it is tough as freelancers. We work alone. If you work as part of a team in a company and a project takes a dive, then there are other people to, hopefully if you have a good team, you'll go out for a beer or you'll, slap each other on the shoulder and say, oh man, you got a team to support you. And for sure as a freelancer it is tough, so you do have to figure out some strategies to survive.
And one of them is to, create your own support network. I built mine right out of boot camp. That's where I met Monica Day. We started just the two of us supporting each other. I met, so many people over the years that now when that thing happens, when I lose, I can call Belinda or Monica or I have so many people I can call and go, oh my God, I'm so bummed. I just found out I didn't get the control. And they've been there and they can empathize with me, and I'm not alone in it. And because they then mirror back, just like you did on this call, you're like, look, I've had failures, I don't win 9 out of 10 times. Then you feel better about it, I want to talk more about turning pro, and I'm going to call this, in honor of our conversation, the truck driver mentality, because I really love how you use that metaphor. And so, man, my keyboard does not want to click today, and I don't know why. It's very stubborn. Would you please? I hope I'm not frozen. Sorry, minor technical issue here.
You don't have any.
We can advance the slide if you'd like, Marcella.
Would you go to the next one for me?
Certainly.
Thank you. So, this is where Pressfiel talks about turning pro, and I just love this because he says, look, the moment an artist turns pro is I won't even try to say that, as the birth of his first child. With one stroke, everything changes. I can state absolutely that the term of my life can be divided into 2 parts, before turning pro and after. And I love this other quote because, Nick, this sounds so much like you. There's no mystery to turning pro. It's a decision brought about by an act of will. We make up our mind to view ourselves as pros, and we do it. Simple as that. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so Nick, I thought we might just take your metaphor of the truck driver and look at, this is Pressfield's definition of what is a professional. And I just love this, and it totally fits your metaphor. And maybe you can just say share a little bit about what you shared with me on the phone about what that truck driver mentality is.
Sure. It's basically saying that, like, the millions of other people out there, we have a job. And like millions of other people out there, if you're a truck driver, you don't sit over breakfast making your thermos, having woo-woo moments. You just, you go to maybe your truck's park it at home, maybe it's parked in a yard or whatever. You just go to work and you get in the truck and you settle down and you put the key in the, you turn on the truck and that's it.
And fire it up.
So when you read this list of, we show up every day, we show up no matter what, we stay on the job all day, it's like, duh, this is
right.
this is what everyone does. It's only us fancy pants writer that would find this list like, oh my goodness. Everyone else, whether you're a street cleaner or you're flying an airplane or you're a doctor, you look at this, well, of course, that's what we do. That's what we do. We have a job. Of course we do that. But
and I love some of the things he says on here, like we receive praise or blame in the real world, meaning you don't take your poem to your mom and show it to her and she goes, oh, this is lovely, dear, right? You're going to turn your copy into your client who is not your mother, who is probably not going to say, oh, how lovely, dear. They're going to shred it 6 ways from Sunday, but you're a professional.
Yeah.
So you're going to take it and you're going to incorporate that feedback and you're going to get back up, show up at the desk the next day, and do it again. Again, that not over-identifying with your job. This isn't you, it's your job. The truck isn't you, you drive the truck.
Yep.
I love this because this is really, the difference between loving your work, and I think this is where so many writers fall into that trap of falling in love with their words. We have all these different rules that we try to teach them that they cannot fall in love with a copy, but I just love how he states this here. He says, you can do your work out of love. You have to love it. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to do this. Nobody wants to sit at a job that they hate 24 hours a day. I love to write. I love my job. But too much love is a bad thing because too much love makes you choke. Too much love makes you think that the copy that you wrote is you. And it means that then you can't edit it like you need to, or you can't listen to feedback, or you just freeze, And so that's why I love when he says playing for money or adopting the attitude of one plays for money lowers the fever.
Yep.
So maybe talk a little bit about, how do you get over that when when you're just absolutely in love, to stop yourself from falling in love with a copy and being able to see it objectively, not as this baby you've created, but this is just copy, and then I'm going to rework it, and my client's going to comment on it, and then I'm going to rework it some more.
It's tricky. It's tricky because you do put part of yourself into it when you do it well. When you don't do it well, you put none of yourself into it. It's pure craft and no passion, no gift. But when you really, if you're working on a job that is perfectly aligned with what you do best and what you believe in, and it feels important to you, then you do put part of yourself into it. And when you do that, you are making yourself more vulnerable to criticism, to failure. But again, I'd say, what, get over it. If you want to do great work, you will put yourself up for judgment and put yourself up for a fall every now and again. If you don't want to do that, then don't do this job.
Well, and I love how when he says professionals master technique, like the solution to that sometimes is get really, really good at what you do. Because in terms of criticism, I know in my career, the more I have mastered my techniques, the better I've gotten, the more positive the feedback. Like, part of that's under my own control. You know what I mean?
The other thing that's under your control is the clients you choose to work with.
Very true.
Because if you work with a client who is not, a true professional, doesn't really understand what he or she is saying when they go through your copy, again, you're setting yourself up for,
major headaches.
Major headache. It's a pain in the butt. I mean, I was talking this morning. I was emailing. Someone was writing to me, said that, I've got this terrible problem. I've got way more clients than I can handle, and the trouble is now I'm kind of letting my clients down because I'm not giving them enough time and stuff. And I was like, hey, nice problem to have. And
right.
She was saying, hey, I'm really, really good at getting clients. I'm just not good at servicing. And I just said, hey, look, fire 80% of your clients. Just find the ones who are the best clients to work with, who you respect the most for their knowledge and expertise, and who will pay you the most. And just
and focus on them.
Apologize and say no to everyone else. Because if you work for anyone, and sometimes we'll do this out of desperation because we need that extra $500 to pay a
right.
month. Then we get sloppy in our choosing a client. We'll choose a not professional client, and it'll be a misery. It'll be the most miserable $500 we ever earn. I'm not saying I've never done that. I have, but I focus very much on. Yes, I'm a professional, whatever. If it's a bad client, a good client, I try to be,
right.
I have mastery of the technique. I know my craft. I will do a professional job. But I'll never do my best work unless I put actually part of myself into it. And I can never do that if I'm not actually working for a very good client.
Well, and I'm having trouble. Here we go. So I love where he talks about this with Tiger Woods, and he says he seeks out the most knowledgeable teacher and listens with both ears. And that's true because really it's not just, you need to remember that you're not just seeking out copy chiefs or people to give you feedback from, say, your Circle of Success members or AWAI or your peers. You're also getting that from your clients. So if you want the most knowledgeable teacher and the best experience, you want a client who will actually teach you something. I mean, I've learned more about writing from my boardroom experience, just as much probably as I've learned in, working with AWAI and others, because my clients are repositories of their own knowledge, do you know what I mean, and their own history. And so think about that when you're picking a client. Do you really want to have to deal, like you said, with some sort of clueless client who's incredibly frustrating, who doesn't even get it when you're writing good copy, or do you want to deal with someone who is going to teach you, like, here, we tried these 5 tests, and here's what we learned from it. I mean, I think it makes a huge difference. And I just want to wrap up this section real quick by, again, it comes back to failure. A professional does not fear failure. They don't take rejection personally. They don't let it stop them. They self-validate. They're tough-minded. I love your example of, I just assume the client's an idiot because I got to protect myself. And sometimes the truth is they are, right? I mean, you got to have that thick skin. Is there anything else you wanted to say about turning pro before I get to go put the woo-woo debate forward?
Sure. No, that's good. Let's keep going.
Okay. So, when you get to the end of the book, what's really interesting is he gets involved in thinking, and speaking about where do our best ideas come from? What is the source of creativity? And for me, where I think this conversation is important is it allows me to remove myself as the reason behind the success or failure of a package to a certain extent. It gives me that creative distance. Because if I believe that everything has to come from inside of me, it's easy for me to get overwhelmed and paralyzed. So, for example, Pressfiel says, and this is his quote, he says, "If you believe in God, and I do, you must declare resistance evil, for it prevents us from achieving the life God intended when he endowed each of us with our own unique genius. Genius is a Latin word. The Romans used it to denote an inner spirit, holy and inviolable, which watches over us, guiding us to our calling. A writer writes with his genius. Everyone who creates operates from the sacramental center. It is our soul seat, the vessel that holds our being in potential, our stars, beacon, and Polaris. And then I just compared this to, and I put this, I know, Nick, you and I talked about this before, that I really love this piece, the TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert on genius. And she really gives this because she says right at the start of the call that she had this sort of freakish success of eat, pray, love, and it sort of undid her. She was like, how will I ever achieve this again? And I do think I experienced a little bit of that. You know, you can call it a fear of success, whatever, that like we get that first big breakthrough, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I had that moment of, oh my God, what if I could never pull this off again, you know? And for her, this is what I love. This is how she describes genius, and I think it's a hoot. She says, the Greeks famously called these divine attendant spirits of creativity demons. Socrates famously believed that he had a daemon who spoke wisdom to him from afar. The Romans had the same idea, but they called that disembodied creative spirit a genius, which is great because the Romans did not actually think that a genius was a particularly clever individual. They believed that a genius was this sort of magical divine entity who was believed to literally live in the walls of an artist's studio, kind of like Dobie the house elf, and who would come out and sort of invisibly assist the artist with their work and would shape the outcome of the work. And what she talks about there is giving yourself a little bit of that creative distance, again, so that the work is not you. And that when you have flashes of brilliance, that's not completely you either. And when you can't come up with a good idea to save your soul, that's not completely you either. And for me, that's been really helpful. But now let's hear the non-woo-woo side of that. I'm guessing that if I ask you if you have a Dobie the house elf who lives in your studio, you're going to kill me.
No, I don't. And if whatever works for anyone, go for it. You know, if it helps you to have, you know, some totem or something on your desk or on your wall that you rub it 3 times in the morning. If that helps you get focused and work hard, go for it. Nothing wrong with that at all.
I think for me what it does is remove it. It allows me to take the pressure off myself. I can just, you know, he uses that line, you are entitled to your labor but not the fruits of your labor. And what turning it over does for me is get me to stop thinking about the end game. It's like, okay, I'm actually not in charge ultimately of whether this package will succeed or not in the world because there's all these things I can't control. But what I can do is give up wanting to control the outcome and instead get to my desk every day, show up, and do the very best job that I can. And then whatever happens after that, I know I showed up and did my part, and then the rest is up to something outside of me. Does that make sense?
I think that's excellent. I think you should, that last 45 seconds, you should get that transcribed.
And read it to myself. I know.
Well, no, put it out there somewhere for everyone to see, because that is a perfect description, I think.
And you know what I love is the reason I gave this link to the TED Talk is because we talked about this on our when we were talking about this book earlier. She tells that hysterical story about Tom Waits, the musician, and he's driving down the highway. And he has this idea for a song, and he can't get to the pen, and he doesn't know how he's going to pull it off right, and he's freaking out. And then he finally just looks up at the sky and says, can you not see that I'm driving right now? Like, if you really need me to write down this song, wait till I get home or go bother Leonard Cohen, you know? And that idea that, like, just being able to collaborate between yourself and something that is sort of not quite yourself that takes the pressure off has gotten me past those moments of sheer terror. And I want to...
There's any one, like we talked about this when we were talking a few days ago, there's any one caveat I think I would hang out there, and that is be careful that, because the way you describe it I think is absolutely right and absolutely fine and very helpful. But I know people, I've coached people who have actually used it by externalizing things. Have used that as an excuse. They've removed responsibility for the day's work from themselves and said, because I only rubbed the Buddha's tummy twice instead of 3 times, or the muse didn't come to me, and so all of a sudden they're absolving themselves of responsibility of being a pro.
Yeah, they've given up they're missing the truck driver part of the equation.
That's right. So yes, by all means, invoke the muse, but it ain't going to work if you don't turn up at work and do the job. And I mean, I just, hey.
That's so true. You know, that quote he has in the book from Somerset Maugham, what does he say? He says, of course I believe, in invoking the muse and creativity. If they want to find me, I'm at my desk from 9:30 to 5. I have to show up.
Exactly right. So my only, like I say, caveat is never ever use absence of inspiration or absence of muse or absence of the Buddha's tummy as an excuse for why you didn't turn up and get your work done that day.
Absolutely. And what I want to just finish up with is how can you use this woo-woo stuff, as we have been jokingly call it, to get you to the desk. So the difference between using it as an excuse for not coming to the desk and using it to actually get your butt in chair, as many writers say. And I love this whole elaborate ritual that he begins with. This is on the first page of the book. Just cracked me up. I know I couldn't even get through reading it, and you were laughing. So he says, I take a shower, I have breakfast, I make my phone calls, I get my coffee, and then here's what I love. I put on my lucky work boots, stitch up the lucky laces my niece Meredith gave me, head to my office, crank up the computer. My lucky hooded sweatshirt is draped over the chair with the lucky charm I got from a gypsy for only $8. My lucky Largo name tag that came from a dream I once had, and I put it on. On my thesaurus is my lucky cannon, and he points it at himself. And then he says the prayer, which is the invocation of the muse from Homer's Odyssey. And he's got his lucky cufflinks and the acorn, and then he plunges in. And I do think, and I know you had a fantastic report years ago that I read called Writing Rituals. And Katie, I think it's still, is it part of a course? Do we still have it at AWAI? I know we must, right?
Oh, Katie's mute.
Yes, we do. It is available.
Oh, great. And I think it comes with one of your courses, Nick. We'll figure that out. But what I loved about it is, did you want to say something, Katie?
No.
Okay. What I love, sorry, I'm getting an echo on the phone, so sometimes I'm hearing myself come back. What I love about that report is really that there is a way in which, we've talked about butts in the chair, showing up at the same time every day, right? I start at 9 because you are training, just like the truck driver gets up, has his coffee, grabs the thermos, gets in the truck. You're training yourself, okay, here's the order of my day. I get up, I do this, I get to my desk, and pretty soon your body learns this is the routine for starting my day. And then you're in the work without even, I think when you start every day differently, you lose the discipline. Now it becomes a big deal to get yourself to the chair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you don't have that consistency of it. And so for me, I have to share that my office is just filled with crazy woo-woo stuff, so I thought I would throw some fun stuff out there. So I don't have a cannon, but I actually have, this is a Chinese foo dog, and so this is what keeps my critic at bay, right? He takes her out when she gets carried away, and I can't get the writing done because my critic is screaming in my head. So that's my woo-woo thing to stop the critic from taking over. This is my Buddha. I don't have a belly. I just have the head where my headsets rest, which remind me to pay attention to the copy, pay attention to the rhythm, to the flow. It's like a visual reminder for me. Oops, this is just not my day with the mouse thing here. Can I have the next slide? Oh, there we go. This one will really set you off, Nick. So I have a writing altar, and when I'm at my desk, I always light a candle, and that reminds me that's my Butson chair. If the candle's lit, I'm at my desk and working. Then I have my fountain pen and my ink, and then the bowl, this is a new thing that I've been working with. The bowl with the stones is to keep me from overbooking myself with commitments. So when I take on a project, whether it's, coming to boot camp or writing this email or that email or this promotion, I put a stone there, and they are relative to each other in size so that I can see how quick this keeps me from overflowing, right? Because I've got some big stones in there that are some large magalogs I'm working on. So these are the things that center me in my office and keep me focused on my work. And I do actually have, this is fun. I have, these are the evil eye pendant from Greece to keep the, bad mojo away. And for me, coming into my space with all this stuff around me reminds me that I'm at work. So I know that I'm guessing that your office is not quite as woo-woo as this. But I wanted to ask you, are there things, visual things, or the way that you set up the desk or where your office is that kind of remind you each day and center you, okay, I'm getting to work now?
No. Other than the fact
all that setup and I get a no.
Yeah, other than the fact that it's my desk and has my computer on it, it's the only place I can do my work. No, I don't have any kind of bits and pieces like that.
No lucky shoelaces. No lucky coffee cup.
No.
You are that's just way too boring, Nick. I'm going to bring you lucky shoelaces and a lucky coffee cup to boot camp.
I just sit down and do the work.
Oh, I hate you for saying that. We are almost at the end of time. I want to just quickly go through next month's books, and then I want to just give folks some time to ask us woo-woo or non-woo-woo questions. I just wanted to end with this quote, which I love. Give us what you've got. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It is a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And that's what I want to say to everyone out there who's struggling with their project. We want to see what you've got. Give us what you've got. You've got gifts and talents that we need to see. And I just loved this from Jen Adams. She said, finished The War of Art last night. Had only intended to read for a minute or two before bed. Absolutely inhaled the whole thing. Great read. And when I woke up this morning, I tackled a project that had been scaring me all week. Feeling awesome, productive. That's the whole reason why we turn pro right there in a nutshell. I want to quickly invite everyone to next month's selection. We're going to do this live from boot camp. Our special guest is Richard Armstrong. We are reading Claude Hopkins' My Life in Advertising and Scientific Advertising. I really want to encourage folks to engage on the Facebook page or email me, send me questions, comments you want to ask Richard. I think this is just going to be fantastic. I hope that everyone at boot camp will be there with us. I think it's going to be just a fun experience. And here's why Richard picked this book. And I just love how he phrases this. He says, I chose My Life in Advertising for the same reason I would choose Plato to launch a discussion of philosophy or the Old Testament to begin a course on Western religion. Hopkins' books are not only among the oldest surviving texts on copywriting, they're still among the best. He's not the first great copywriter, but he was the first to set down rules and principles based on his success in the real world of advertising. And he's read this for the 10th time, and those who were gallivanting with me at the Titans event this weekend, this book came up. Katie, I lost track. It had to be, 4 or 5 times when people said this is the one book I would read.
Absolutely. Gary Bencivenga, who's retired now, he still reads it every single year, he says.
Oh, that's right. So start reading it. If you have read it before, no excuses. Unless you're up to 10, you should be reading it again. And if you're new, you definitely want to start on your first time. Katie, and we have some winners who will get the book for free from AWAI if you want to let those folks know.
Congratulations to Denise Mintz, Kathy Lewis, Jennifer Reynolds, Brad Peterson, Jason Reese, Catherine Anasto. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. Kathy Kuhn, Joe Asante, Kyle Hale, and Ted Johnson. Your books will be... What, Nick?
Where's my one?
You didn't win. You didn't win. And winner, you'll be getting a package from Amazon soon with your book in it. We will send you an email just to confirm that we have your correct mailing address. So be on the lookout for that. And as soon as you respond back, we'll get your book in the mail. And just want to remind everybody who's registered is eligible to win a book every single month. We do the drawing the Tuesday before the Thursday of the book club meeting. So that's just a little fun perk. And Nick and Marcella, I think this was fantastic. This was so useful and so interesting. And I really appreciate your time and generosity in sharing your such personal stories with us. We have a couple questions.
Fire away.
Okay. There's two along this line. We got our copywriters backs up a couple people. Both Rick and Bill. Rick and Bill are making the same type of comment. There are several places where Pressfiel seriously disparages advertising and marketing. He actually seems to include us as part of the resistance, and we wanted to get your opinion about that.
For me, I do both. I write both advertising and marketing copy, and I write journals, I write poems, I write stories. I don't differentiate. To me, Katie, you and I were just at the Titans event, and what really struck me was Marty Edelston had sort of 4 principles that he lived by, and the 4th was we save lives. And I have always felt that way. I've been fortunate to write for Alternative Health and for financial newsletters. I remember writing a sidebar on inflammatory breast cancer on one of my first projects with Boardroom. And it was this rare form. It sort of looks like bug bites. Women missed it. All these women were dying because they didn't know, and they would wait too long. It didn't have any of the same symptoms. And I remember when I finished writing that article and, describing and warning and saying what they needed to do, I thought, this is real information that needs to get out there that could possibly save a life. And I see testimonials about that all the time, coming back on my clients' products. So for me, I don't write for people whose products I don't believe in, that I don't think matter to the world, that I don't think can make a difference to people. And so I don't have that sense that there's, a disparaging difference. I love writing journals, and I also love writing information that I believe can change people's lives, and it makes me feel good about it. And I'm even woo-woo about my clients. When I'm working on a big project and I'm sending a magalog out into the world, I actually ask that in sort of whatever I believe in, greater than me, that those packages find the people who most need that information at that point in time. And that's my woo-woo way of answering it. Now let's hear the truck driver's response.
A couple of things. I know exactly where he's coming up from when he says that, because to be honest, when I watch TV ads or ads in newspapers or half the ads on the internet, I just groan because it's just nonsense and ridiculous and just badly done. So yeah, I would say the vast majority of marketing and marketing writing is nonsense and nothing to be proud of. So I'd say a couple of things. Is that there are a very small handful of copywriters where when I look at their work and their writing, and I judge it by any standards, the same standard I would apply to a novelist or a poet, I can look at that writing and say that is outstanding writing by any set of standards. There are very, very few copywriters who can do that for me. I mean, probably on the fingers of one hand. I'll read their work and I'll say, just as
Gary Bensavenga comes to mind, who Katie mentioned earlier. He's just fantastic.
Yeah, just as an example of just masterful craftsmanship, just beautiful writing. So that I think is worthwhile. The other thing, in fact, it was a friend of mine who I was having this conversation with him years ago, and I made the same point. I said, you know what? I said, one of these days, and it's a strange thing for me to say because I'm an atheist, but I said, one day I'll go up to the pearly gates and St. Peter will say, what did you do with your life? And I'll say, I wrote some really outstanding junk mail. And I was asking myself, is this enough? Is this enough for a life? And this friend of mine, he said, hey, you're forgetting something. Because I'd, in fact, written a piece of direct response for him when he was starting a business many years before. And his business was struggling. And I just wrote him this one letter that transformed his business. In fact, he had to employ a whole bunch more people. He had to buy more delivery vehicles. He said, you wrote that stuff for me. And he said, in fact, what you wrote made me cringe because it was so hard sell. But the outcome was very positive. You created jobs for people. You launched my business for me. It was, what you did was...
You contribute to the economy. You make more opportunities.
It's the lifeblood.
It absolutely is.
It's the lifeblood of the economy. But Rick, now Bill has a little bit of a different take on that. He says, I agree with Rick, and he doesn't remember exactly what Pressfiel said, but he read it to mean that selling out was when you were trying to write what you think what the reader wants to read. So maybe that's more what Pressfiel was talking about, that it's when you're not writing your true authentic self or when you're just writing to try to
Well, and he also talks about, Pressfield also talks about what he calls like shadow careers. And what he says is, look, let's say that this is what you want to do with your life, and you're afraid to write the thing that you should write. So you write all these other things, right? So that's in one way in which he says you're sort of false because you're not true to yourself. So if you have a novel in you and you have always wanted to write the novel, as many copywriters are both, right? But somehow you decide you can't do that, so all you do is copywriting and you do it out of this shadow, resentful way because you can't do the work you want to do. I do think it starts to get sort of dark and twisty, but for me, I've never made it an either or. I get up in the morning and I write in my journal and I write essays, and then in the afternoon I write copy, and the two feed each other for me. So I don't have that either or feeling that I sold out. I love and appreciate my copywriting. It keeps the lights on. Let me tell you, my journal entries are never going to pay the lunch bill. But at the same time, there's things I learned from both, like the fact that you have to capture people's attention, right, with your copy, and that you're 2 seconds away from ending up in the garbage can. If you don't think that makes me force the opening of my novel to be entertaining, like I know the same thing. They don't have to read my novel, So I don't look at it as an either or. And I do think, maybe, Nick, you can say more to his comment, which is the first part of it about, trying to force something false in your copy when you're like selling something you don't believe in, maybe, or taking on a tone that isn't true to it. Your experience of selling out as a copywriter.
I try to.
We're lucky enough not to have to take the projects that we don't believe in anymore. But I will fully admit that in the beginning I had to take some that I thought were a little dodgy.
Right. And I think also it's how you write. It's like I know how to write in a way that is purely manipulative of my reader. I know I'm pressing some deep psychological buttons. I know that if I do it well, I can get them to waste money on some garbage that they absolutely don't need. That's not a very feel-good experience writing that kind of stuff. So when you can, you say no to that stuff. No, I don't want to do that. No, I think your product's a complete waste of money, and I think you're just manipulating people to buy it. So, hey, I might say no to that. Someone else might feel totally comfortable and say yes to that.
There's a flip side of that. I remember having this conversation with Paris early on where we were working on a sidebar, and I wanted to give away the whole story, the whole sort of health story of whatever the solution was, right? And he's like, no, 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 and he's making me hold back, and he's making me tease. And I said, I can't help it. I know they need this information, and it's helpful to them. I want to put the whole thing in the Magalog. And he said, Marcella, which would you rather? You put the whole story in the Magalog, and you don't sell very many of them because you've given it all away, and there's no tease. Therefore, they never buy the book and never get the 4,000 other life-saving tips. Or you write the copy in like you said, a clever, manipulative, very skillful way that gets more people to buy the information that you believe in, that you know is really valuable and could save lives. And as soon as he said it that way, I'm like, oh, it's sort of like using my tools for good or my tools for evil, right? I'm using my tools to ultimately do good in the world. And sometimes that means I'm going to be manipulative in the copy because I want them to buy the book that has the cure for cancer in it, because I want them to read it.
So long as you believe in the outcome, hey, we're with our kids. We're manipulative with our kids.
Of course, for the greater good, all the time.
We want them to make the right decision. We want them to do the right things. So we'll perhaps be a little manipulative in what we say because we know it's really important we get them to this particular place. So, yeah.
I want to just remind folks, this has been a great discussion. As always, feel free to continue it on the Facebook page. I'm also going to encourage folks to please drop me questions for Richard Armstrong, and I'm going to ask if you can please do that by the end of next week. Denise and I are going to be talking today about how we're going to run that live event. Richard and I are talking next week. I really want to know, we've got a lot to cover and only an hour to do it. Richard is just a brilliant, very successful A-list copywriter. Do not waste this opportunity. Read that book. Look at them. Distill it. Ask me, you know, what's the essence of the book that you would like Richard and I to comment on so that I can make sure that we all get the most out of that discussion. With that said, let's just remind everybody of our lineup real quick. November's selection is Technique for Producing Ideas. It's a little bitty pamphlet. You can literally read it in a day, and it's a fantastic creativity and productivity book. And we're going to be joined by the fabulous Bob Bly for that. In January, we're going to go back to sort of the nuts and bolts of the canon for copywriters, sort of the hammer that everyone needs to have in their tool chest, and we're going to do the elements of style. And our special guest for that is Gordon Graham.
Marcella, I just want to, since we're wrapping up here, Lisa just put in one comment, and I think it's appropriate to end with. She said she recently watched a movie called Hemingway and Builder. Ernest Hemingway told her that writing wasn't hard, and you just needed to show up every day and bleed. He said only 1 out of 100 pages he wrote was any good. So,
wow.
There.
Butt glue, butts in chairs, showing up. I truly believe that 90% of the success in this business is showing up. And for me, all that great woo-woo stuff that I have in my office and that I use to overcome my fear of showing up, my fear of criticism, my fear of rejection, my fear of failure, all that stuff is what helps me to show up. And that's why I am like the ultimate woo-woo girl. And then, of course, I have to thank our fabulous guest, Nick Usborne, for showing us that the other side of showing up is the truck driver mentality. You take a paycheck, you pack the lunch, you get up in the morning, you go to the job, and you put in your time, and you do the work. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Nick, I really appreciated it. This was a great call, especially since I know you were feeling so under the weather, and that you showed up just like the truck driver, and we're here for us. It's just wonderful.
You're welcome.
All right, and we will see everybody, I hope, live at boot camp.
And you'll see us, too.
Yes, for once you get to see us.
Okay, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye.